You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. Sleep offers no sanctuary, not anymore. The clinicians murmur diagnoses, PTSD scrolled neatly on a chart, but that word feels hollow, inadequate for the jagged rift torn through reality that night in Blackwood Ridge. Perhaps committing it to paper, exercising the memory onto the page, will finally grant me silence. Perhaps then the scratching will cease. It began, as such things often do, with bravado steeped in alcohol. Leo's promotion was the excuse, the rusty mug, the venue. 5 of us, myself, Elias, Leo, Clara, Ben, and Maya, buoyed by cheap lager and congratulations, drifted into recklessness. Someone, lost now in the haze of intoxication, slurred a challenge. A midnight trek through Blackwood Ridge. Barely a mile distant, the woods loomed, and our collective inebriation painted the idea brilliant. A chill had descended, the air sharp near 45 degrees. As we stumbled onto the trailhead, my phone glowed 11:47 p.m. Above, a fat moon hung swollen and bright. Yet down here, the dense canopy swallowed its light, leaving only pockets of spectral illumination. Our phone beams sliced through the oppressive dark, painting dancing circles on the path ahead. We laughed too loudly, jostling like adolescents. "Careful!" Clara shrieked as Leo feigned a shove, their laughter echoing unnaturally, swallowed by the trees. I trailed behind with Maya and Ben. The crunch of boots on gravel, the only steady rhythm. Then abruptly, it wasn't. The world went quiet. Not merely quiet, but silent. A profound absence of sound, as if a cosmic switch had been thrown. No crickets thrummed their nocturnal song. The breeze vanished. Even our footfalls seemed absorbed by the thirsty earth. Maya halted. "Elias, do you hear anything?" We froze, strain in our ears. Nothing, then a faint disturbance. A dry chitinous skittering, like claws dragging across desiccated bark. It emanated from the impenetrable blackness flanking the trail. "Just a possum," Ben offered. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. We pressed onward, huddled now, the easy camaraderie replaced by a prickling tension. The skittering persisted, a phantom companion. Now left, now right, sometimes seeming to scuttle just inches behind us. Each time we spun around, flashlights cutting frantic arcs, the woods remained stubbornly empty. That's when the cabin materialized. It wasn't there one moment, and the next, rounding a curve, it squatted before us. A solid block of deeper shadow against the Stygian backdrop. Perhaps 20 feet square, constructed of ancient weathered logs, its roof bowed like a broken spine. No windows pierced its walls, only a single door, hanging askew on corroded hinges. "Impossible," Leo breathed, his voice tight. He'd roamed these woods since childhood, knew every trail. This place, it wasn't here. Clara mumbled about wrong turns. I fumbled for my phone, seeking the comforting blue dot of GPS, but found only stark emptiness, no service. A quick check confirmed the impossible. All our phones, fully juiced mere hours ago at the mug, were utterly dead. The skittering intensified, Closer now. A definite movement rustled the undergrowth behind us. A fleeting shape darker than the dark. Instinct, primal and unvoiced, propelled us forward. We scrambled towards the cabin. Leo wrenched the protesting door open, the shriek of tortured metal splitting the silence. We tumbled inside, Ben slamming the door shut, the heavy thud echoing in the confined space. Our frantic beams revealed a single, dirt-floored room. Barren save for a decrepit wooden chair slumped in one corner and set into the packed earth what appeared to be a heavy trapdoor bound with iron. The air hung thick and wrong, redolent of damp soil and an unplaceable, faintly metallic tang. "Where in God's name are we?" Maya whispered, the words barely audible. Before an answer could form, footsteps sounded outside, heavy, measured, circling the small structure. The log walls groaned under an unseen pressure. Then came the whispers, not human language, not anything decipherable. A sibilant chorus, words like broken glass tumbling in a void, filled with too many consonants, folding back onto themselves in grotesque euphony. Many voices weaving closer, their cadence accelerating. Clara's fingers dug into my arm like talons. "You hear them, right? Elias, tell me you hear them." "We have to leave," Ben urged, taking a hesitant step towards the door. Instantly, the whispering ceased. Silence descended again, taut and terrifying, lasting perhaps 5 heartbeats. Then, wham! Something immense struck the door, the impact vibrating through the floor, shaking the entire cabin. Ben recoiled. Clara screamed, a raw, tearing sound. More blows rained down. On the walls, the roof, the aged logs groaning in protest. Dust sifted from the low ceiling. "The trap door!" Leo yelled, already scrabbling at the iron ring embedded in the floor. "Help me!" Ben and I lunged, adding our weight. It resisted, then yielded with a grating shriek of wood on compacted earth. Our lights plunged into a square abyss, revealing worn wooden rungs descending into blackness. Above, the assault intensified. Wood splintered overhead. Something was tearing its way through the roof. "Go!" I shouted. "Move!" Clara scrambled down first, then Maya. Ben hesitated only a moment before following. Leo paused at the lip. "Elias? Behind you, just go." He vanished. I turned to follow, but the shriek of rending wood from the main door froze me. I swung my light back. Through the widening cracks, I saw things, glimpses of motion, shapes that defied understanding, limbs too long, too numerous, bending at impossible angles, and eyes, myriad pinpricks of phosphorescence gleaming in the darkness. I practically fell down the rungs, yanking the heavy trapdoor closed above me just as the cabin door imploded with a deafening crash. The steps dropped perhaps 15 feet into a narrow earth-walled tunnel. Ahead, the bobbing lights of the others were already receding. I plunged after them, running, trying desperately to block out the sounds from above. The scrabbling, the awful, wet chittering, the footfalls of things that should not walk. The tunnel twisted, branched. We chose paths at random, fueled by blind panic. The air grew colder, the walls shifted from packed earth to damp weeping stone. Water dripped rhythmically somewhere unseen. Minutes stretched into an eternity before we slammed into it. A dead end. Solid rock. No escape. No. Clara sobbed, sinking against the cold stone. No, no. We turned trapped. The sounds from the tunnel behind us grew louder, closer. Our lights pierced the oppressive blackness, revealing nothing, yet the whispers echoed, amplified by the stone confines. Faster now, frantic, hungry. "Lights out," Leo hissed. "What? Are you insane?" Maya hissed back. "Trust me, kill the lights. Now." One by one, our beams died, plunging us into absolute suffocating darkness. I pressed myself against the unyielding stone, fighting to quiet the frantic hammering of my heart. Certain its frantic rhythm would betray us, the whispers slithered closer. I could smell it now. A rank fungal odor, thick and nauseating. Something scraped stone nearby, just around the last bend. I squeezed my eyes shut. A futile gesture in the ink-black void. The scraping stopped, seemingly right before us. I felt a feather-light touch against my cheek. Cold, impossibly rough, like ancient bark. I bit down hard on my lip, tasting blood, stifling a scream. The whispering was intimate now, directly in my ear. I felt breath on my skin, but it was frigid, devoid of warmth, like air exhaled from a deep, forgotten cavern. Then, as suddenly as it began, it retreated. Silence rushed back in. We remained frozen in that Stygian tomb for an age. No one moved. No one breathed more than necessary. Finally, Ben's trembling whisper broke the stillness. "Gone?" The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken fear. At last, Leo risked his light. A single, narrow beam illuminated an empty tunnel. After another 10 minutes huddled in shared terror, we began the slow, cautious retreat. Disoriented by panic, navigating the branching tunnels took time, but eventually, we found the base of the wooden steps. Leo ascended first, easing the trapdoor open. The cabin stood empty, violated. The main door hung in ragged splinters. Deep, savage gouges scarred the log walls. Whatever had hunted us was gone. We didn't linger. We ran, bursting from the cabin's ruin, back onto the trail, back towards the distant promise of streetlights. No one spoke. We just ran, lungs burning, until the artificial glow of civilization welcomed us back from the abyss. The police, predictably, found nothing. The daytime search of Blackwood Ridge yielded no cabin, no disturbed earth, no sign of tunnels beneath. Nothing. We don't speak of it now, the 5 of us. Ben relocated across the country. Clara and Maya ceased contact. Leo remains, adrift in the bottom of a bottle. I returned once, driven by a desperate need for proof, for understanding. Under the indifferent gaze of daylight, I scoured the woods, searching for the anomalous trail, the impossible cabin. I found only trees and silence. But as I turned to leave, defeated, I heard it. Just for a fleeting second. That dry, skittering scratch. And beneath it, almost subliminal, the faintest echo of whispers. I fled. Blackwood Ridge remains forbidden territory. Yet, sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I awaken to a familiar sound. Scratching, seemingly inside my own bedroom walls. and if I press my ear close, straining against the plaster, I can almost discern the shapes of words within that broken, alien language. The doctors call it PTSD. They prescribe pills to smooth the jagged edges of my nights. They weren't there. They didn't hear the whispers that defy sanity. They didn't glimpse the geometry of nightmare through a splintering door. I record this not for belief, but as a testament, a warning. Should you find yourself wandering after dark, should a structure appear where none should be, resist the urge to seek shelter within. Regardless of what pursues you from the shadows, do not breach that threshold, because the entities inhabiting the cracks in our world occasionally grow curious about us, and their curiosity is a consuming, terrible thing. Last night, the scratching returned, but it was different. This time, amidst the sibilant chorus, one syllable detached itself, cold and clear. They were whispering my name, Elias. Its head swiveled, a friction-smooth glide, until the vitreous orbs fixed upon me. Not eyes, but polished voids reflecting the sterile fluorescence. Yet somehow they saw. My breath hitched, a snagged thread in the sudden suffocating quiet of the gilded cage after closing. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, sluiced through me. The solitude I thought I possessed was a dangerous illusion. What frantic whispers of my mind had previously dismissed as exhaustion's phantoms now solidified into stark, impossible reality. Innocence was the initial currency. Nights spent adrift in the gilded cage, a cathedral of commerce hushed after the day's worshippers departed, were meant to be mundane. The graveyard shift, restocking silks, aligning porcelain smiles, was a necessary sacrifice for tuition. A quiet harbor for study amidst the scent of expensive perfume and floor wax. But 3 weeks dissolved the peace. It began subtly. Whispers, like static bleeding from the void between aisles when no one else breathed the conditioned air. Merchandise migrating with unseen hands. A scarf draped here when it had definitively been folded there. Figures of fiberglass and resin, posed just so, seeming to subtly shift their weight, to angle their heads a degree closer. When my back was turned, fatigue, I reasoned, grasping for logic, an imagination overstimulated by isolation and looming exams. That illusion shattered tonight. While adjusting a cascade of evening gowns, I heard it. Not a whisper, but a distinct, internal click-whir, the sound of dormant clockwork stirring. I pivoted, heart a frantic drum against my ribs. One of them, draped in midnight blue velvet, its painted smile serene, was rotating its head with that impossible, fluid motion. We locked gazes, mine wide with dawning horror, its utterly vacant, reflecting only the overhead lights, a pause stretched thin as wire. Then the shudder ran through its plastic frame, a grotesque ripple under the fabric. A leg lifted, impossibly high, joints protesting with faint, dry squeaks, and it descended from its pedestal with the stilted grace of a reanimated marionette. Instinct screamed, "Flee!" I bolted, a terrified animal crashing through the curated wilderness of the store floor. Racks of chiffon toppled like dominoes. Jewelry stands scattered their glittering wares in silent explosions. Behind me, a symphony of the uncanny gathered volume. The hard clack-clack of articulated limbs on polished tile. The dry scrape of plastic on plastic. the high-pitched whine of unoiled, unnatural joints. Not one, but several. They were hunting. The sanctuary, a cramped staff room smelling faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. Door slammed, bolt thrown, a metal chair wedged beneath the knob. Flimsy defenses against the impossible stalking the aisles. Fingers trembling, slick with cold sweat, I stabbed at my phone screen. 911, state your emergency. A gasp tore from my lungs, ragged and thin. Help me, please. The Gilded Cage department store, the mannequins, they're animate. They're after me. A measured pause crackled back, thick with disbelief. Ma'am, have you consumed any intoxicating substances this evening? No. The word ripped out, raw with terror and indignation. It sounds crazy, I know, but it's real. You have to send help, please. Another pause then. Okay, ma'am. Remain calm. A unit is en route. Silence descended, broken only by my ragged breathing and a new sound. A dry, insistent scratching at the door. Wood splintered near the knob. The chair wedged beneath it juddered violently. Distant sirens wailed. A fragile promise growing stronger, closer, louder. But the scratching intensified, joined by heavy, rhythmic thuds against the wood. With a final ear-splitting crack, the door exploded inward, ripped from its frame. They flowed into the room, a tide of blank stares and articulated limbs, filling the small space with their silent presence. But they halted, parting silently, reverently, clearing a path, and from their midst stepped my reflection. Not in glass, but in flesh-toned plastic. Perfect down to the crescent scar beneath my chin. The scatter of freckles across the bridge of my nose. Only the eyes were wrong. Flat, dead pools mirroring the chilling vacancy of the figures surrounding us. What are you? The question felt thick, clumsy on my tongue, absurd in the face of the impossible. She smiled. A precise muscular arrangement, utterly devoid of warmth. I am you, the voice, a chillingly accurate echo of my own timbre, replied. The upgrade. We observed, we learned. Your time inhabiting this form is concluded. Horror, cold and sharp, pierced through the layers of panic. These weren't just animated figures. They were usurpers. Why? I breathed. The question barely audible. The replica tilted its head, a gesture of contemplation perfectly, unnervingly mimicked. Evolution necessitates replacement, survival, advancement. Your species reached its zenith some time ago. Ours is ascending. Heavy footsteps pounded through the store's main floor, echoing in the cavernous space. The police. Seconds to decide, to act. My gaze locked onto the red cylinder of a fire extinguisher mounted in the corner. With a guttural cry born of desperation, I hefted it, swinging its weight wildly towards my duplicate's impassive face. Impossibly fast, its hand shot out, catching my wrist in a vice grip that threatened bone. The plastic felt unnaturally hard, cold. Resistance, it murmured, the voice laced with false, mocking gentleness, is inefficient. Go to hell, I spat, driving my knee upwards with all my strength into its midsection. A flicker of something. Surprise? Simulated pain? Crossed its features as it buckled slightly. The grip loosened fractionally. I wrenched free, adrenaline surging, and burst from the violated sanctuary of the staff room. Officers, in here! Help! I screamed, rounding a display of glittering evening bags and nearly plowing into two uniformed figures, their flashlights momentarily blinding me. "Ma'am?" One started, lowering his beam, hand instinctively moving towards his sidearm. "Are you all right? We got a call." Then behind me, that stolen voice, dripping with false relief. "Thank heavens, officers, you're here!" I whirled. My replica stood composed, radiating manufactured concern. The other mannequins had vanished as if they'd never been. "This woman," it said, indicating me with a perfectly manicured hand, its gesture damningly calm. Forced entry. I discovered her raving in the staff lounge. Something about living statues? Perhaps substances are involved? "Lies!" I shrieked, voice cracking, sounding hysterical even to my own ears. "She's the fake. I work the night shift here. Check the schedule." The officers exchanged a look, the universal, weary language of dealing with the unstable, the intoxicated, the delusional. "Okay, deep breaths, everyone," the first officer said, voice level but firm. "Let's see some identification from both of you, please." Ice flooded my veins. My purse, my wallet, my employee ID, all sitting uselessly back in the staff room, now likely in its possession. Powerlessly, I watched as the replica produced a slim leather wallet from a pocket I didn't possess, smoothly extracting a driver's license. My face, my name, my address stared back from the plastic card. "This is madness," I pleaded, desperation making my voice shake. "Check the employee records. Look at the security tapes. Call Mr. Henderson, the manager. He'll tell you." "We'll get it straightened out, ma'am," the second officer said, his tone attempting reassurance but achieving only dismissal. "But for now, you need to come with us." As they guided me towards the main entrance, past shattered displays and silent, watchful figures lurking just beyond the pools of flashlight beams, I looked back. The replica offered a small, serene wave, a perfect citizen. The sterile chill of the precinct was a different kind of prison. Questions blurred, answered robotically while my mind screamed against the bars of disbelief. Proof? Belief? Futile concepts in a world suddenly tilted on its axis. A more insidious thought burrowed deep, chilling me further. How pervasive was this silent invasion? Were the impassive faces behind the booking desk truly human? The officers driving the cruisers? The pedestrians glimpsed through the squad car window? The world outside these walls felt suddenly suspect, potentially hollow. Sleep refused me in the stark, echoing holding cell. Morning brought verification, release, and the pinched, disapproving face of Mr. Henderson, the store manager. His voice was tight with controlled fury during the silent drive back. "I won't pretend to understand last night's episode, Elara, but consider this your only warning. Any further disruption, any hint of this instability, and your employment is terminated. Understood?" I offered only a numb nod. How could words contain the enormity of the truth? The monstrous reality nested within the mundane. As Henderson's sedan slid into a parking space near the employee entrance, I saw it. Me, striding purposefully towards the Gilded Cage's grand glass doors, employee badge clipped neatly to its lapel, ready for a day's work. For a heartbeat, our gazes connected across the sun-drenched asphalt. It smiled, that same placid, empty curve of the lips. and gave another small dismissive wave before disappearing inside. My legs felt like hollow reeds as I exited the car. Flight was an option. Vanish, forget, pretend this nightmare hadn't clawed its way into reality. But the image of those vacant eyes, multiplied across countless potential replacements, walking unseen among us, burned behind my own. "Ilara, are you joining us?" Henderson called impatiently from the doorway, keys jingling. I drew a breath, tasting the city's morning grit, steeling myself against the wave of nausea and terror. "Yes," I replied, the word steadier than I felt. A tiny spark of defiance in the overwhelmed darkness. "I'm coming." Stepping over the threshold, the familiar scent of perfume and polished surfaces felt alien, menacing. My eyes swept across the silent sentinels arranged on their platforms throughout the store, their poses artful, their faces masks of serene indifference. But I saw them now. I knew their secret. The quiet war for humanity had begun, and terrifyingly, impossibly, I was its sole conscious soldier. God help us all. Some truths don't announce themselves. They ambush you in the quiet corners of the ordinary. For me, that corner was the ironclad depository, a cavernous warehouse where I guarded the slumbering inventory. And the truth arrived on the whisper of illicit dealings, one windswept October night. A night that began like any other graveyard shift, but ended with the shattering realization that the most lethal secrets often fester behind the most unremarkable facades. A realization bought with terror and destined to reroute my entire existence. My name is Elias Vance. For 3 years, the echoing solitude of Ironclad had been my nocturnal sanctuary, a place where the drone of fluorescent lights and the occasional scuttling rodent were the only company. It funded my modest life, affording me vast, silent hours to chip away at the novel, perpetually inhabiting my thoughts. That was the rhythm, the predictable quietude I'd come to rely upon before everything fractured. It was a Tuesday, late in the month. The kind of night where the wind clawed at the corrugated steel walls, making the whole structure moan like a dying beast. Shadows writhed in the periphery. I'd just settled into the cramped security kiosk, my thermos steaming beside a notebook filled with fictional dangers far removed, I thought, from this concrete and steel reality. The initial hours bled away in familiar patterns. Perimeter checks, the rhythmic click of my flashlight beam cutting through aisles stacked high with dormant cargo. A labyrinth of shelving scraping the distant ceiling. Usually, the isolation felt meditative. Tonight, though, a current of unease prickled beneath my skin. Perhaps it was the skeletal rattle of the roof in the gale. Or maybe the residue of the particularly visceral scene I'd penned earlier. Regardless, the sensation lingered. I was not alone. Around 2 in the morning, piercing the building's ambient hum came the aberration. A faint chink metal kissing concrete, almost swallowed by the wind's howl. But 3 years of listening to the night's subtle language had honed my senses. That sound was alien. I killed the volume on the small television, sputtering in the kiosk, straining my ears. It came again, the distinct scrape, followed by low, urgent murmurs. The source? The warehouse's north sector, a zone designated as empty, dormant. A cold fist clenched around my heart. This wasn't the familiar scrabble of displaced vermin or the groan of settling pallets. This was human presence. Instinctively, my hand went to the radio clipped to my belt. I keyed the mic, but only static answered. The North Sector, the depository's deepest reach, sat beyond the transmitter's feeble grasp, swallowed by the sheer mass of metal and merchandise. A precipice. Retreat to the kiosk, dial the authorities, and risk the intruders melting away before help arrived. Or venture forth, gather proof, become the protagonist I so often wrote about. Hindsight screams the sensible choice, the call for backup. But in that charged moment, slick with adrenaline and perhaps an inflated sense of capability borrowed from my fictional heroes, I chose the latter. Flashlight clutched tight, I moved toward the disturbance, my boots whispering on the dusty floor. The voices solidified as I drew nearer, fragments snagging on the air. Faster, damn it, the clock's ticking, one hissed, serrated and impatient. This ordnance is heavy, grumbled another voice strained, doing what I can. My pulse hammered against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat I feared would betray me. Edging around a towering stack of crates, I saw them. 5 figures swathed in shadow, dark clothing blending with the gloom, wrestling containers onto a waiting forklift under the stark glare of a portable work lamp. My gaze snagged on a familiar crate stencil. Electronic components, logged the previous week, bound for a downtown tech firm. But as one man levered the lid open with a crowbar, the contents gleamed dully, rows upon rows of firearms. My breath hitched. Not pilfered electronics, weapons. A chillingly vast and lethal cargo. Perhaps I gasped. Perhaps a loose pebble skittered underfoot. Whatever the tell, one of the figures snapped his head up, his eyes locking onto mine across the intervening space. For an eternal fraction of a second, the tableau held. Then chaos erupted. "Intruder!" the man roared, his hand darting to his waistband. No time for thought, only instinct. I spun, pounding back the way I came, the concrete unforgiving beneath my feet. Shouts echoed behind me, the heavy thud of pursuing boots gaining ground. I plunged into the maze of aisles, a desperate flight through the steel jungle. But they moved with unnerving familiarity, anticipating my turns, cutting off avenues of escape. Blindly, I bolted down one corridor only to find it ending in a solid wall of shelving. Trapped, footsteps closed in from the mouth of the aisle. Panic flared. My eyes darted wildly, seeking refuge, a weapon, anything. Then I saw it. A narrow fissure between 2 colossal wooden crates, barely wide enough to accommodate a man. Without a second thought, I launched myself into the gap, splinters tearing at my jacket, the rough wood scraping skin. I held my breath, pressing myself flat as boots pounded past, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness just inches away. A moment of fragile hope shattered when a voice commanded, "Spread out. Check every shadow." He didn't vanish. Time was bleeding out. They would find me. I needed a lifeline. Trembling fingers fumbled for my mobile phone. Predictably, no signal bars illuminated the screen. Despair began to creep in, cold and absolute, until I remembered the emergency call function. A long shot maybe, but the only one I had. My thumb, slick with sweat, jabbed at the digits. 911. The agonizing seconds it took for the call to connect stretched into an eternity. 911, what is your emergency? The calm professional voice felt like a miracle. In a choked whisper, I relayed the nightmare. Ironclad depository. Armed men. Smuggling weapons. I'm hidden. They're searching. Hurry, please. Sir, remain calm. Units are being dispatched immediately. Can you stay on the line? Before I could utter a syllable, a hand clamped around my ankle like a vice, yanking me violently from my sanctuary. My phone skittered across the concrete. The operator's distant voice swallowed by the sudden proximity of danger. I was hauled upright, staring into the furious eyes set within a ski mask. Thought you could play hide and seek, watchman? The man spat. Rough hands bound my wrists behind me, the cord biting into flesh. I was shoved forward, forced to my knees before the others. Now what? One of them asked, his voice tight. The apparent leader, a tall man, distinguished by a jagged scar cleaving one cheek, regarded me with chilling appraisal. No loose ends, he declared, his tone flat, final. Deal with him, then finish loading. We move. The world tilted? This was it. My ending, played out amidst dusty crates and illegal arms, a consequence of misplaced curiosity and reckless bravado. One of the men stepped forward, raising a handgun. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact. Instead, the night air split with a sound more beautiful than any symphony. The rising keen of police sirens, growing louder, closer, undeniable. The warehouse detonated into frantic motion. The smugglers scattered, weapons clattering to the floor as they bolted for exits. Shouts of "Police! Freeze!" reverberated through the space, punctuated by the thunder of running feet. When I dared to open my eyes, uniformed officers swarmed the area. One knelt beside me, slicing through my bonds, his voice urgent. "Are you all right, son?" The ensuing hours were a disorienting whirlwind of flashing lights, sharp questions, and formal statements. Most of the smugglers were apprehended, though a couple vanished into the pre-dawn gloom. The scale of the operation they uncovered was staggering. A major arms trafficking ring operating seamlessly beneath the veneer of legitimate commerce, right under my oblivious nose. As the first fingers of dawn painted long shadows across the warehouse floor, a detective approached me. "Mr. Vance," he began, his expression serious. "Your quick thinking tonight. It likely averted considerable bloodshed. These weapons," he gestured vaguely, "in the wrong hands, well, the damage is unthinkable." I managed a numb nod, the night's terror still clinging to me like frost. "Just doing my job," I mumbled, the words feeling inadequate. The detective offered a wry smile. "You did substantially more. Showed genuine steel. Ever considered putting that courage to professional use? Law enforcement." A weak laugh escaped me. think I've exhausted my lifetime quota of excitement detective. But even as I spoke, watching the meticulous police work unfold, something fundamental shifted within me. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind not just exhaustion, but a nascent sense of purpose, starkly real compared to the fictional worlds I inhabited. My quiet nights of solitary patrols and crafting narratives felt irrevocably distant. I had brushed against genuine peril, witnessed true consequence, and the retreat to mere observation felt hollow. In the weeks that followed, the detective's question echoed. Maybe that spark of courage, ignited in terror, wasn't an anomaly. Maybe it was a signpost. 6 months later, I stood on the grinding threshold of the police academy. The path wasn't easy. The training pushed me to limits I hadn't known existed. Yet, whenever doubt surfaced, the memory of that night in the warehouse, the fear, the desperation, the unexpected resilience surged back. Now, cruising city streets in a patrol car, the ghost of ironclad depository sometimes flickers at the edge of my thoughts. I reflect on how a single, unremarkable Tuesday detonated the trajectory of my life. And I know with unshakable certainty that the most profound transformations, like the deepest dangers, often lie dormant in the utterly mundane, waiting only for the courage to heed a strange noise in the dark, and the wisdom to finally call for backup. It began not with silence, but its shattering. Sleep had claimed Alara utterly. A deep surrender after a day spent tracing ridges under an unforgiving sun. The refuge, a mere box of timber with a cot and a cast iron stove, had seemed an idyll. She'd sought sanctuary here, a deliberate severing from the clamor of existence. The deadlines, the chatter, the ceaseless digital hum. Miles dissolved between her and the nearest soul. The phone lay inert, a brick of silenced obligation. Only the forest's vast breathing quiet was meant to share her solitude. A week she'd booked, envisioning sun-drenched trails yielding to evenings spent watching flames devour logs, the hush deepening around her. This communion with the wild wasn't new. Her childhood was etched with the scent of pine needles and campfire smoke. Yet, this pilgrimage was her first undertaken alone. And the inaugural night delivered precisely the tranquility she craved. A profound stillness that felt like absolution. Then, the second night bled into something else. A resonant thud jolted her from oblivion. Not the groan of old wood settling, nor the sigh of wind through branches. This was solid, definitive, like a burden dropped onto the porch planks. Elara sat bolt upright, pulse a frantic drum against her ribs, vision struggling to pierce the profound dark. She strained, listening, breath held captive in her lungs. Nothing followed but the immense, waiting silence. An animal, perhaps? A fallen limb? Reason scrabbled for purchase. She sank back down, drawing the rough blanket to her chin. The frantic tempo in her chest gradually slowing. But sleep, once disturbed, proved elusive. Just as its edges began to soften her awareness, another sound emerged. A faint, insistent scritching. It wasn't the random noise of the woods. This was different. Taut as a bowstring, she rose again, every nerve alight. The sound was delicate, almost surreptitious, fingers tracing patterns on the outer wall, the very timbers mere inches behind her head. A glance at the bedside clock, 3 to 18 a.m. Cold floorboards met her bare feet as she ghosted towards the window. Lifting the worn curtain a fraction, she peered into the monochrome world outside. Moonlight, thin and spectral, painted the porch boards silver, revealing nothing but empty space and the skeletal fingers of distant pines. No source, nothing. She let the fabric fall, retreating, a cold fist clenching in her gut. What recourse was there? No signal, no neighbor within earshot, just miles of indifferent wilderness, utterly, terrifyingly alone. The scratching ceased. Ilara remained a statue carved from fear, ears straining against the quiet. Then a new sound materialized, a soft, rhythmic patter against the window pane. Slow dread turned her head. The glass reflected only the cabin's Stygian interior, yet a palpable presence pressed in, an unseen gaze. The tapping persisted, gentle, methodical, as if testing the barrier's integrity. A step back, another. Her hands trembled, her heart a wild bird trapped in her chest. The urge to scream, to flee, warred with a paralyzing terror. She was prey, cornered and exposed. Abruptly, the tapping stopped. The ensuing silence felt heavier, more menacing than the sounds it replaced. It pressed down, thick and suffocating. She dared not move, scarcely breathed, simply waited in the crushing stillness. Minutes stretched into an eternity before she compelled her limbs to obey. Backing away from the window, eyes locked onto the dark pane, she found her way to the cot. She burrowed beneath the blanket, a rigid knot of fear, mind racing, staring sightlessly at the low ceiling until dawn's gray light finally seeped through the cracks. Morning arrived, unwelcome. Ilara rose, joints stiff, mind thick with exhaustion. Outside, she circled the cabin, scanning the dew-kissed ground, the porch, seeking any clue, any tangible evidence of the night's intrusions. Nothing. Not a disturbed leaf, not a single footprint. As if it had all been a phantasm born of isolation. She tried to rationalize, to dismiss it as frayed nerves, the wilderness playing tricks, but the prickling sensation of being observed, the feeling of something lurking just beyond perception, refused to dissipate. She hiked that day with a desperate energy, seeking solace in exertion, forcing normalcy onto the landscape. Yet, returning to the cabin as dusk painted the sky in bruised colors, the unease coiled tighter, more potent than before. That evening, she surrendered to exhaustion early, praying for oblivion. Sleep hovered close, a tentative promise, only to be ripped away by the familiar, delicate scritching from beyond the wall. Upright again, heart hammering, mind screaming, she fought the instinct to hide, the desperate wish not to know, but inaction felt like surrender. Trembling, she crept to the door, fingers fumbling with the latch. She eased it open a mere sliver, a narrow aperture onto the night. Absolute stillness greeted her. The moon, a sliver itself, offered little illumination. Nothing moved. Nothing waited. She secured the door, the bolt sliding home with a definitive click, and retreated, backing towards the cot. Alone. The word echoed in the hollow space within her. She perched on the edge of the mattress, coiled, every muscle screaming readiness for flight. She listened, waited. The silence stretched, taut and unending. Hours crawled by. Eventually defeated, she slid back under the blanket, a sentinel condemned to sleepless vigilance, staring into the darkness, waiting for sounds that this time did not return. With the first true light, Elara moved with feverish haste. Belongings were thrown into her pack, the remnants of her intended sanctuary abandoned. She didn't pause, didn't grant the cabin a final glance. The car engine roared to life, an alien sound in the profound quiet. Wheels spun on the dirt track, carrying her away, hands strangling the steering wheel, eyes fixed forward, thoughts a frantic cascade. What unseen thing had haunted those woods? What presence had watched from the darkness? She possessed no answers, only the chilling certainty that clawed at her resolve. She would never, ever return. The initial shriek clawed ice down my spine. A second, raw and ragged, confirmed the night had fractured. Something venomous coiled in the warehouse darkness. And I, Elias Vance, was the sole witness, the only sentry against it. 6 months I'd walked the shadowed corridors of the Argent Sprawl logistics hub, a sprawling beast of corrugated steel and concrete. Night security, a quiet harbor after the sand-scoured chaos of 2 deployments. Mostly, it was locks and echoes. The occasional scatter of trespassing youths seeking illicit thrills. The pay was thin, but the silence was balm. Afghanistan had filled my quota for adrenaline. This shift began under a bruised twilight sky, unremarkable. A nod to Fitzwilliam finishing his daylight watch, then the familiar rhythm of the patrol. The sprawl was immense, a labyrinthine geometry of storage units and echoing warehouses. My circuit typically consumed a couple of hours. I was deep within its metallic veins when the sound came, a dull, percussive thump vibrating from Unit Delta 7. I stilled, head canted, listening past the groan of settling architecture. Old buildings breathe strange sighs, but this felt different, malignant, an itch between my shoulder blades. Delta 7 stood dormant, a new graft onto the complex, supposedly hollow, void. No authorized personnel, no cargo, nothing. Caution tightened its grip as I moved toward it, my hand instinctively finding the reassuring weight of the taser on my hip. Closer now, whispers slithered beneath the door, punctuated by the scrape of something substantial dragged across concrete. Summoning dispatch was the protocol, the smart play, but doubt, seated by a radio prone to capricious silences, stayed my hand. Teenagers? Overkill. I'd risk a look first. Its service door hung slightly open, a blade of artificial light carving the gloom outside. I nudged it wider, the hinges emitting a low groan that screamed betrayal in the quiet. Inside, the whispers died instantly. I slipped through, hugging the cold wall, a ghost in my own territory. Emergency lights cast long skeletal shadows. The main overheads remained dark, towering stacks of crates and pallets formed canyons of obscurity. Dust and the ghost of machine oil thickened the air. Deeper I crept, vision straining against the oppressive dimness. Then, shapes resolved from the murk. 3 figures clustered near a stack of anonymous crates. dark attire, faces erased by ski masks. One clutched a crowbar like a scepter. My pulse became a frantic drum against my ribs. Not kids, not amateurs, professionals. Every instinct screamed retreat, call for backup. Now. But a morbid curiosity, a need to know, held me fast. What cargo warranted this clandestine violence? Edging nearer, using the pallet stacks as fractured cover, I caught fragments of their low exchange. Certain this is the consignment? Affirmative. Intel says millions. Let's secure it and dissolve. This place unsettling. A screech of tortured wood as one pried a crate lid. A glimpse inside stole my breath. Not merchandise, weapons. Sleek military-grade armaments, gleaming darkly. Things that belonged nowhere near Argent sprawl. I'd stumbled into the deep end, far beyond my pay grade or armament. Extraction, communication, that was the priority. I began a silent withdrawal, mind racing, formulating, when my own radio chose that precise moment to erupt. A crackle, then the disembodied voice. Control to Vance, status check, all quiet. The warehouse plunged into absolute silence, save for the frantic hammering in my own chest, surely loud enough to betray me. A beat passed, thick with menace. Then one of the figures spoke, his voice flat, devoid of heat, chillingly precise. Locate him. Stealth evaporated. I bolted. Feet pounded on concrete behind me as I burst from Delta 7 into the cool indifference of the night. No looking back. I knew the sprawl's arteries, its hidden passages. I cut between structures, doubled back, threaded through narrow service lanes, trying to shed the pursuit. But they fanned out, coordinated, their footsteps echoing, closing the net. I plunged into another warehouse, this one a graveyard of defunct machinery. Crouching behind a hulking, rust-streaked conveyor belt, I fought for breath, for clarity. The guard shack, my phone, salvation. It lay across the complex, with them positioned squarely between. A sound, measured footsteps entering this new space. Deliberate. I pressed myself into the cold, unyielding metal, holding my breath until my lungs burned. "We know you're in here, night watchman," a voice echoed, laced with false nonchalance. "Show yourself. Make it easy." Easy meant dead. No witnesses. The footsteps neared, the beam of a flashlight cutting impatient arcs through the gloom. Around the conveyor's rusted snout. Desperate, my eyes snagged on a length of discarded pipe. Heavy, solid, better than bare hands, palms slick with sweat. I gripped it. The breathing was close now, just beyond my shield. The light swept past, returned. He rounded the edge. I swung. A wet, solid thud echoed in the cavernous space. The figure crumpled. No time for assessment. I fled again, back into the maze. Distant shouts confirmed they knew. They'd be enraged now, relentless. Running was finite. They'd corner me. I needed leverage, a disruption. An idea sparked. Reckless and born of desperation, maintenance Sector Gamma. Cleaning supplies, equipment, and crucially, the nexus for the complex's sprinkler system. I slipped inside, eyes adapting quickly. The panel gleamed dully on the far wall. Fingers, surprisingly steady, danced across switches and valves. Lessons learned alongside combat engineers in a dustier, deadlier place surfaced. Voices outside, approaching fast. No more time. The final switch thrown, I scrambled for cover. A pervasive hiss, then the deluge. Water rained down across the entire sprawl. But not just water. I'd cross-connected the system, pulling from the vats of industrial-strength cleaner stored within Gamma. A caustic cocktail drenched everything. Shouts erupted. Surprise, then fury, then pain. A grim satisfaction flickered. Let them hunt with burning eyes on treacherous footing. Through the ensuing chaos, blaring alarms, flashing strobes, the chemical downpour making every surface slick, I pushed towards the guard shack. Almost there, a figure materialized from the swirling mist. One of them, eyes crimson slits, streaming, he lunged, swinging the crowbar in a wild arc. I ducked, driving low, tackling him. We hit the wet pavement hard, sliding, grappling in the chemical slurry. He was powerful, fueled by rage, but I fought with the ferocity of survival. I gained leverage, pinned him beneath me. Over! I gasped, the acrid air searing my lungs. Sirens are coming! As if summoned, the distant wail began to grow. His eyes, wide with panic, moments before, narrowed into pure venom. A desperate surge of strength threw me clear. He scrambled up, vanishing back into the chemical haze. Let him run. The cavalry was arriving. I reached the shack, dialed 911. Then the sprawl's owner. By the time uniformed officers arrived, the sprinklers had begun to dilute the evidence. But the crate of weaponry remained irrefutable alongside my sworn statement. An investigation bloomed. The truth unfurled in the following days. Argent Sprawl, a node in a vast network of international arms trafficking. The owner professed ignorance, but threads led higher, deeper. They called me a hero, floated talk of commendations, even recruitment. I declined. The quiet I sought had been shattered too violently. Now I watch over polished floors and consumer desires in a suburban mall. Shoplifters are the apex predators here. It suits. Yet sometimes in the sterile hush of late hours, the memory surfaces. The metallic tang of fear, the weight of the pipe, the hiss of the chemical rain. And a chill traces its old path, reminding me that darkness often pools deepest in the most ordinary corners, waiting for an unwitting step. Fear isn't my usual companion. Solitude suits me, the quiet hum of my apartment, a welcome silence. My life follows a simple rhythm, predictable and contained. Most evenings post-work find me tracing familiar paths, running, not competitively, just a meditative circuit around the local park, a green lung near my building. It's close, known, safe, I always thought. Until a few weeks back, when the familiar curdled into something else. The evening was unremarkable, draped in the cool tranquility of impending night. Sunlight stretched thin and golden, painting long skeletal shadows across the grass. The air held that perfect equilibrium, neither biting nor stifling, ideal for the steady cadence of a run. My route began as always, through the wrought iron gates, over the quaint stone bridge arching above the whispering creek. a loop embracing the glassy surface of the lake, then back. The park breathed emptiness, a state I preferred, populated only by the occasional fellow runner or solitary dog walker. Peaceful, utterly, deceptively peaceful. Minutes into my stride, he registered. A figure approaching on the path, moving against my current. Unfamiliar, which pricked my attention. Months of running this course had etched the regulars into my mind. He wore a hooded sweatshirt, the cowl pulled low despite the mild air, paired with dark denim. Not typical park attire. An oddity, I mused, dismissing it as I maintained my pace. We passed, and in that fleeting proximity, I felt it. The distinct prickling sensation of being watched. A hunter's focus. A quick sidelong glance confirmed it. He hadn't averted his gaze as convention dictated. Shadow obscured his features beneath the hood, yet his head remained angled distinctly toward me. Disquiet settled, a cold stone in my gut. But I pushed onward, assuming he was merely transient. But completing the lake loop brought me back toward the entrance, and there he stood, still, near the gates where my journey began. Logic balked. My circuit was brief. He couldn't have returned so quickly unless he deliberately reversed course, shadowing my path. He's just out for a walk, I insisted internally. Yet the stillness of him, the focused observation radiating from his posture, felt wrong, purposeful, waiting. I quelled the unease, finished my run, and retreated to the sanctuary of my apartment, chiding myself for nascent paranoia. It was nothing. The next time, however, confirmed it wasn't. Dusk bled into the sky, the park even more deserted. As I commenced my run, my eyes found him instantly, near the entrance, stationary, not walking, not surveying the scenery, just present, watching. My pulse leaped, a frantic bird against my ribs, but I fought to project indifference. Eyes down, focus on rhythm, I ran past without acknowledgement, rounding the lake. A backward glance revealed emptiness where he'd stood. Relief, cool and swift, washed through me. Perhaps I'd imagined the intensity. But approaching the entrance again, preparing to leave, I saw him. Off the path's edge, partially screened by bushes. He didn't stir as I neared, offered no greeting. Yet the weight of his unseen eyes pressed against my skin. I accelerated, feigning obliviousness, feeling his gaze track my departure. Back home, the unease lingered, clinging like damp cloth. The image persisted, the hooded stillness, the obscured face, that unwavering attention. I tried to rationalize, to laugh it away. Just some local eccentric. People have a right to be in public spaces. Yet, instinct screamed otherwise. Over the ensuing week, avoidance became my strategy. I varied my timings, hoping to disrupt whatever pattern aligned our presence. Futile. Each time, he materialized, always near the entrance, always watching. Sometimes standing sentinel, sometimes walking counter to my direction, but invariably, Vashikasa there, as if tuned to my schedule. One evening, desperation sparked a change. I arrived earlier, late afternoon sun still warm, and began my run on the park's far side, near the lake's opposite shore. A new trajectory, I reasoned, might render me invisible. For the first half, blissful normalcy reigned. No sign of him. Relaxation began to unspool the tight knot of anxiety. Maybe it had been coincidence, amplified by imagination. Then, nearing the completion of my altered loop, I saw him, further down the path this time, walking slowly in the same direction I was headed. I instinctively slowed, hesitant to overtake him. The moment my pace slackened, he stopped. He stepped deliberately off the asphalt onto the grass verge and watched. My stomach plummeted. Follower or bizarre coincidence? The distinction blurred, irrelevant against the chilling certainty that this was directed, intentional. Right then, the decision crystallized. No more evening runs. The gnawing apprehension wasn't worth it. Morning runs, I resolved, safety in daylight. Yet days later, drawn by some stubborn defiance or a need to disprove my own fear, I found myself back at the park as twilight deepened. I rationalized. Stick to the main, well-lit artery near the entrance. A short, cautious loop. Safety in proximity. Initially, the path remained clear. Relief flickered. Perhaps he wasn't here tonight. Perhaps the spell was broken. Then, halfway through my curtailed circuit, I saw him. Ahead, positioned on a narrow dirt trail, branching off into the park's denser, unlit woods. Just off the main path, his form half swallowed by the encroaching trees and shadows. My pace faltered, heart hammering against my sternum. Look away, don't acknowledge him, don't betray the fear coiling inside. But I knew. He was waiting. I forced my legs into a steady rhythm, feigning unawareness, propelling myself forward. As I drew almost level with the side trail, he moved, stepped smoothly from the dirt onto the main path, turning to face my direction, beginning to walk towards me. My breath hitched. Turn back, too obvious, too much like prey bolting. I kept moving forward. A veneer of calm stretched taut over raw panic. Acutely aware of his approach, his eyes surely fixed on me from the cavern of his hood. We were about to pass. Then he angled his body, cutting diagonally across the path, a trajectory clearly designed to intercept mine. Not casual, deliberate. I stopped dead, mind scrambling. Options flashed, turn and sprint, but could I outpace him? He was closer to the exit now, seemed to possess an unnerving familiarity with the terrain. I resumed walking, faster now, a determined stride belying the terror seizing my limbs. He matched it, falling into step just behind me, close enough for his presence to be a palpable pressure at my back. A peripheral glimpse confirmed it. The hooded silhouette, face still lost to shadow. Footsteps unnervingly silent, steady. Trapped, heart slamming, thoughts racing. To my right, a small clearing opened onto another, less traveled trail. A path I vaguely knew, looped eventually toward the road. My only chance. I veered sharply, plunging off the main path into the relative darkness of the secondary trail, praying he wouldn't follow. The instant my feet hit the dirt, I heard it. His footsteps behind me, quickening, heavier now, closing the distance. He was following. No doubt remained. Sheer terror ignited adrenaline. I broke into a desperate sprint, legs pumping, lungs searing, breath tearing in ragged gasps. No looking back, only the frantic drive forward. Behind me, his pursuit was audible, heavy rapid footfalls gaining ground with alarming speed. The trail snaked through dense undergrowth, unseen branches clawing at my arms as I crashed through, panic a blinding roar in my ears. Just as my muscles screamed for cessation, hope flickered ahead. The faint, diffused glow of streetlights, the distant hum of traffic. The road, so close. I surged, legs trembling, lungs burning, pushing past exhaustion. I could almost feel him, a tangible presence inches behind me, reaching, then abruptly, as my feet hit the scrubby verge bordering the trail's end, his footsteps ceased, vanished. I didn't pause. Bursting from the trees onto the roadside pavement, I waved frantically at a passing car, a desperate plea swallowed by its speed. It didn't stop. Heart pounding like a drum against my ears, I spun around, fully expecting him to emerge from the tree line, silhouetted against the dark woods. The trail mouth gaped empty. He was gone. I stood there, gulping air, listening to the frantic thrum of my own pulse. Waiting, watching the silent trees, braced for his reappearance. Nothing. The park held its breath, shadows pooling deep and silent. I was alone. Eventually, shaky and cold, I navigated my way home. I haven't been back to the park. I can't. The mere thought conjures the dread, the icy finger of fear tracing my spine. Who he was, what he intended, remains a chilling mystery, but the certainty persists. He was hunting me. And had I not fled precisely when I did, the outcome might have been irrevocably different. Now, the simple thought of running outdoors tightens that same knot in my stomach. The feeling endures, that he's still out there somewhere, waiting, watching, and that park, once my sanctuary, is now a place I will never tread again. Scarcely a week had passed since I'd taken possession of the keys, transplanting my life into a compact dwelling on a street that seemed to hold its breath. My weary sedan cooled in the abbreviated driveway after the initial unloading. Boxes cluttered the new floors. Through the windows, I surveyed the terrain. My patch of lawn, the neighboring yards mirroring its quietude. An air of benign uniformity hung over the lane. Houses sat like siblings, simple shapes kept tidy. Nothing jarred, save perhaps the property flanking mine to the left. Its shutters were drawn tight, a wooden blindness, and the grass beneath stood unruly, whispering neglect. An anomaly, I mused, but hardly alarming. Yard work wasn't everyone's priority. Sleep that first night proved elusive. The nervous energy of the relocation hummed beneath my skin, keeping me starkly awake in the unfamiliar dark. Then, near midnight's cusp, a sound threaded through the stillness, thin and unnerving. Not the scuffle of nocturnal creatures, but something distinctly human. Weeping, muffled by the wall separating our structures, yet undeniably sorrowful. Soft, choked sobs punctuated by pauses, as if the mourner struggled for control. I rose, drawn to the window overlooking the adjacent house. A void met my gaze. No lamps glowed within its sealed facade. No vehicle stood sentinel outside. Impelled by a disquieting curiosity, I eased the window open a crack. The lament persisted for perhaps 10 minutes, a fragile ribbon of sound in the night, before abruptly ceasing. Morning found me knocking on the door across the street. A man materialized, perhaps 50, clad in unassuming grey cotton and denim, his short hair framing a face devoid of expression. "Morning," I began, offering my name. alias. Just moved in next door. I gestured towards the shuttered house. Wondered if you knew anything about it? His eyes flicked towards the building, then returned to me, flat and uninterested. That place? Deserted, he stated, tone final. Years now. A frown creased my brow. Strange, I countered, because last night I heard crying. Sounded like it came from inside. He offered a dismissive shrug. Been empty since the owner vanished ages ago. Must have been a stray cat, maybe the wind. His interest clearly exhausted, the man offered a curt nod. The conversation ending as definitively as the click of his closing door. Later, I approached another resident down the block. A woman in her 30s, absorbed in tending her vibrant flower beds, shorts and trainers, marking her as someone active. After introductions, I broached the subject of the nocturnal sounds. Her expression shifted to one of genuine puzzlement. She echoed the previous sentiment. The house stood vacant, had for the better part of a decade, she estimated. Why remained a local mystery? Crucially, she'd never heard a thing emanating from it. The remainder of the afternoon dissolved into the practicalities of settling, arranging furniture in the living space, coaxing the television onto its stand, situating the sofa just so. The kitchen surrendered to order. The refrigerator hummed with newly acquired provisions. By evening, a semblance of home had taken root. Yet, the neighbor's certainty failed to dislodge my own conviction. What I'd heard wasn't animal or element. It bore the unmistakable timbre of human grief. Resolve hardened within me. I would listen again, intentionally this time. As midnight approached, I extinguished every light, positioning myself near the window, facing the silent house. Around 12:30, it began anew. A low murmur of sorrow that swelled, never loud, but piercingly clear in the quiet. It emanated from within those walls, too rhythmic, too resonant for anything but a person. Pressing my ear to the shared plaster, I could almost perceive the vibration. I silenced the air conditioner, straining to capture every nuance. The weeping continued its desolate cadence for 10 minutes, perhaps longer, then dissolved into silence once more. A knot tightened in my gut. This felt fundamentally wrong. The urge to involve authorities surfaced, yet foundered on the lack of tangible proof. Reporting midnight tears from a house declared empty for years seemed a fast track to dismissal, perhaps ridicule. Still, the gnawing uncertainty chafed. Tomorrow, I decided, I would inspect the place myself. The following day dawned warm. Around noon, I ambled over to the forsaken property. Tall grasses, interspersed with defiant weeds, guarded the approach. Dust lay thick on the porch steps. The welcome mat beneath the peeling front door was brittle, cracked like old leather. I peered towards the front window, but the shutters held fast, impenetrable. Circling the perimeter revealed more sealed windows. Everything felt hermetically closed off. An experimental twist of the front doorknob confirmed it was locked. Peeking through the mail slot yielded only darkness, obstructed from within. Silence reigned. No rustle, no creak, no breath of occupancy. A single tentative knock echoed unanswered. Feeling conspicuous and slightly foolish, I retreated to my own domain. Mid-afternoon prompted another attempt at neighborly intelligence. The older couple to my right The Mortons, silver-haired and synchronized in their car cleaning efforts, seemed approachable. Introductions made, I posed the now familiar question about the house next door. The man straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, and recounted the same narrative. Empty since before their arrival, 5 years prior. Belonged to some fellow who'd left abruptly and never returned. Locked up tight, largely ignored. Had they noticed anything unusual? Any strange sounds? He exchanged a glance with his wife before shaking his head definitively. Quiet as the grave, he pronounced. Never heard a peep. His wife murmured agreement, their expressions placid, tinged with mild curiosity about my inquiry. Back inside my own walls, I sought refuge in distraction. The television flickering with meaningless images, but the unease persisted. A low hum beneath the surface of the ordinary. That night, vigilance became preparation. I sat by the window again, notepad and phone at the ready, poised to capture evidence. Precisely at 12:20, the sound returned, soft, yet achingly distinct. I initiated the recording function on my phone. Rising, I scanned the exterior through the window. Nothing. Slipping out my back door onto the small deck, the moon cast long skeletal shadows. The weeping persisted, its origin point undeniably within the neighboring structure. "Hello?" I whispered into the darkness, the sound barely leaving my lips. Abruptly the crying paused. I held my breath, every nerve taut. Then it resumed, indifferent to my presence, my tentative query. I retreated indoors, securing the lock, and listened to the recording. Faint, marred by static, but undeniably present. The sound of someone weeping. My course was set. Tomorrow, the non-emergency police line. This ambiguity needed official scrutiny. The morning call connected me to a polite dispatcher. I laid out the facts. The nightly crying, the consistent timing, the supposedly vacant house. An officer would be dispatched later to investigate, she assured me. Gratitude offered, I disconnected. Around 6 that evening, a patrol car idled at the curb. A uniformed officer approached, listened patiently to my account, jotting notes. He then conducted a methodical check of the neighboring house, rattling the doorknob, rapping on the door, examining window seals. He aimed his flashlight beam through a slight gap in one shutter. Returning to me, his verdict was concise. "Looks empty, sir. Secured tight. Can't see anyone inside." He offered a placating suggestion. "Could be an animal trapped somewhere nearby. Maybe raccoons in the attic. Give us another call if you hear it again." His tone was professional, courteous, yet unconvinced. My own unease remained stubbornly intact. Animals don't weep with such desolate regularity. The timing, the duration, it felt deliberate, human. A new plan formed. Tonight, proximity was paramount. I would venture into my own backyard, hugging the fence line dividing the properties. Perhaps closer observation would reveal a flicker of light, a fleeting movement, some tangible sign of life. As midnight descended, I donned dark clothing and slipped outside, moving with deliberate quiet across the dew-kissed grass. I positioned myself beside the chain-link fence bordering the neglected yard. The neighbor's grass rose higher here, obscuring the foundation, though I could make out the silhouette of a small shed huddled in the far corner. The house remained a dark monolith. Then, punctual as ever, The weeping commenced. Closer now, the sound possessed an undeniable clarity. It originated from within, seeping through the sealed windows. My pulse quickened. A film of sweat prickled my forehead. I forced myself to remain still, simply listening. The sobs belonged to a woman, ragged and uneven, punctuated by shuddering inhalations. No words, just the raw articulation of grief, the impulse to call out lodged in my constricted throat. I stood rooted, a hidden witness until, after its customary 10 minutes, the sound abruptly ceased. Back inside, the simple act of locking the door and splashing water on my face did little to calm the tremor in my hands. The thought of forced entry surfaced, unwelcome but persistent. It wasn't my nature, yet the gnawing mystery, the possibility of someone trapped or harmed, eroded my usual restraint. Not for plunder, but for answers. The next day involved reconnaissance. A walk around the block revealed a padlocked side gate on the far side of the property. The rear fence, like the one bordering my yard, was merely chain link, scalable but conspicuous. Yet the pervasive indifference surrounding the house suggested the risk might be minimal. No one seemed to watch it. No one seemed to watch me. Midnight arrived again. Gloves pulled tight, dark jacket zipped, small flashlight and phone secured in my pockets. Over the fence I went, landing softly in the overgrown grass of the adjacent yard, crouching low. The house loomed, silent and expectant. I waited, and right on schedule, the sorrowful sound began, seemingly emanating from the ground floor, perhaps the living room. I crept towards the side window, testing a shutter. Immovable. Another yielded the same result. Around back, the wooden door was secured by a deadbolt. My gaze fell upon a loose plank in the siding near the steps. Prying it gently revealed a narrow crawl space, exhaling an odor of damp earth and decay. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating only dirt and ragged insulation. No ingress there. The crying continued, softer now, but unwavering. Hope flickered near a basement window on the far side. A corner of the glass was fractured, a spiderweb crack radiating outwards. Tapping it lightly confirmed its looseness. Shielding my gloved hand with a small found stone, I applied careful pressure to the crack, mindful of noise. After tense moments, a shard broke free. I managed to slide the window inward. The flashlight beam plunged into cavernous darkness. Concrete floor, skeletal shelves, the scent of dust and mildew thickened the air. Squeezing through the opening was awkward, scraping against the frame, but I landed inside with a muffled thud. I froze, listening. The weeping was directly above. Wooden stairs ascended into blackness. Each step groaned under my weight as I climbed slowly. The flashlight's beam preceding me like a nervous probe. At the summit, a door. The knob turned freely. Easing it open, I stepped into what appeared to be a kitchen. Relic refrigerator, cabinets shedding paint, a table filmed with grime. The air was cold, raising gooseflesh. The crying originated from her room to my left. Heart hammering against my ribs, I moved towards the sound, flashlight beam trembling slightly. The living room held shapes draped in ghostly white sheets. Sofa, armchairs, coffee table. Then movement in the corner drew my eye. A figure huddled on the floor, back pressed against the wall. Jeans, a stained shirt, tangled hair obscured the face. A slight rocking motion accompanied the soft, continuous weeping into bent knees. I stopped breathing. The flashlight beam found her face as she looked up. Eyes swollen, red-rimmed, glistening with tears and stark terror. I raised my free hand, palm outward. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She remained silent, staring, body rigid with fear. Her breathing was rapid, shallow. "I heard you," I tried again, keeping my tone level, calm. "Every night, I live next door. Are you all right?" Still no response. Only a desperate backward press against the wall. I took a cautious step forward, hand still visible, empty. She flinched violently. I halted. "I just want to help." She swallowed hard, her voice emerging low and raspy. "Leave me alone." Confusion warred with concern. "Is this where you live? They all say the house is empty." She wiped her nose on her sleeve, looking gaunt, exhausted, utterly frayed. Ignoring the question, she repeated, her voice cracking. "Go, get out." A stalemate. She was real, flesh and blood, consumed by some private misery. A squatter, perhaps, hiding from the world? That explained the secrecy, but the ritualistic crying? I retreated a step, not wanting to escalate her fear. "Okay," I conceded softly. "I'll go. But maybe I could call someone. Help you find somewhere safer?" Her head shook vehemently. "No, just go." A cough rattled her thin frame. The palpable tension in the room settled heavily in my own chest. Her fear was a tangible thing. Pushing further felt wrong, cruel. Turning, I navigated back through the desolate kitchen, found the basement door, and reversed my entry, squeezing back out into the cool night air. Climbing the fence felt like crossing back into a different reality. Inside my own house, door secured, I sank onto a kitchen chair, hands shaking, relief warred with profound unease. No ghost, no victim of foul play, but a living woman trapped in a cycle of sorrow I couldn't comprehend. The weeping didn't cease. Night after night, the familiar lament drifted through the wall, but now it had a face, a fragile human source. I didn't return, nor did I call the police again. A strange sort of pity took root. Was she ill? Terrified of something beyond these walls? One afternoon, I left a small offering by the fence line, bottled water and sealed snacks in a plastic bag. By the next morning, it was gone. No sign of her emergence, but the offering had been accepted. I made no further attempts at contact. The crying persisted, its duration varying slightly. 5 minutes one night, 15 the next. The mystery remained unsolved, but the immediate threat felt diffused, replaced by a quiet, helpless witnessing. Then, subtly, a shift occurred. The nightly weeping grew fainter, the intervals between sobs lengthening. One night, silence reigned. The following morning, inspecting the fence line, I saw faint impressions in the soft earth near the empty house's back door, leading away. I never saw her again. The house resumed its vacant stillness. My neighbors remained oblivious, incurious. I kept my discovery locked inside. The house next door stands empty, or appears so. Sleep comes easier now, though sometimes, drifting on the edge of consciousness, a phantom echo of sobbing seems to brush against my hearing. Memory, surely. I keep my doors locked. I avert my gaze from the shuttered windows next door. I know what I found. I know what I heard. It happened. It ended. and I am left with the unsettling gratitude that it wasn't something worse. The groan of the cabin's ancient floorboards resonated deep within Ilara, a jarring counterpoint to the profound quiet, underscoring her deliberate isolation in this sylvan haven. She had believed herself utterly alone, but as the sun bled through the skeletal fingers of the pines, stretching shadows like dark velvet across the clearing, a flicker at the forest's hem snagged her gaze. In that pulse-stopping instant, the sanctuary warped, promising nightmare. Months she had yearned for this reprieve. City cacophony, the ceaseless thrum of expectation, the weight of her career, a suffocating accumulation. Discovering the listing for this far-flung cabin, disconnected from the digital tether, felt like finding a hidden spring. No signal bars, no Wi-Fi hum, only Ilara and the breathing wilderness. The first 48 hours unfolded in tranquil bliss. She traced deer trails through sun-dappled woods, lost herself in novels before the hearth's gentle blaze, and slept with a depth unknown in years. Silence, punctuated solely by the sibilant whisper of leaves or the cry of some unseen raptor, was a poultice on her frayed spirit. The third twilight altered the narrative. Perched on the cabin's raw-planked porch, swirling a measure of wine, she watched the sky ignite in flamboyant streaks of apricot and rose. As true dark pooled in the hollows, the woods seemed to lean closer, their familiar shapes acquiring a latent menace. That's when she perceived it. A brief tremor of motion where the trees massed thickest. A deer, perhaps, or a foraging fox, she initially reasoned. But it recurred, sharper this time, larger than any woodland creature, its passage too measured, too intentional. A frantic drummer took up residence behind her ribs. The wine glass found the porch rail, forgotten, her awareness suddenly acute, pinned to her vulnerability on this exposed threshold. Slowly, deliberately, she rose, eyes straining into the encroaching gloom. "Hello?" The sound emerged thin, a tremulous thread in the vast stillness. "Is anyone out there?" Only silence responded, yet it was a changed silence, taut and listening. She pivoted, taking a tentative step toward the cabin door, every nerve ending shrieking for refuge, for the solid reassurance of lock and bolt. Her fingers brushed the cool metal of the knob just as the sharp crack of a breaking twig split the evening air. Her head snapped around. There, silhouetted against the darkening tapestry of the forest edge, stood a form. Even through the failing light, she registered its human shape. Male, tall, wide of shoulder, features lost to the deepening shadows. He remained utterly motionless, an obsidian statue observing her. Primal fear poured ice through her veins, anchoring her feet. An eternity seemed to pass, the two of them locked in a silent predatory diorama. Then, he shifted, taking a single, deliberate step forward, shattering the paralysis. Ilara lunged inside, the door slamming shut with a resonant thud. Her hands, clumsy with terror, wrestled with the lock. The deadbolt shot home with a satisfying clack, followed by the rattle of the security chain. "Go away!" Her voice, projected through the solid wood, aimed for a strength she didn't possess. "I've called the authorities." A hollow lie. The digital void surrounding the cabin rendered it impossible. She was adrift, utterly alone. Back and away from the door, her thoughts scattered like startled birds. His motive? A lost soul seeking direction, or something far darker? A soft thump against the cabin's flank made her flinch. Another followed, further along the wall. He was circling, probing for ingress. She scrambled to the small kitchen alcove, her hand closing around the heftiest knife in the block. It felt absurdly inadequate. A sliver of steel against the unknown, yet better than bare hands. The cabin, once a cozy refuge, now felt claustrophobic. Its windows like vacant eyes, every shadow a potential concealment. She moved with frantic stealth from room to room, verifying locks, pulling curtains tight against the night. Passing a living room window, a face materialized against the glass, inches from her own. A strangled scream tore from her throat as she stumbled backward, the knife nearly slipping from her grasp. His features swam into focus, a matted beard framing feral eyes that seemed to possess their own luminescence in the dark. A smile stretched his lips, devoid of warmth, purely predatory. "Let me in," his voice drifted, muffled by the pain. "It's turning cold." She shook her head violently, retreating further. "Leave me alone," she cried. "I have nothing you could possibly want." He chuckled, a rasping sound that scraped along her nerves. "Ah, but you do," he countered softly. "You have fire, companionship, and I find myself long overdue for both." The implication hung heavy in the air, chilling her to the bone. This wasn't mere theft. It was a violation sought, a deeper terror. Ilara fled to the bedroom, slamming and locking that door too. Her mind raced, grasping for strategy. The cabin felt sturdy, yes, but against determined force? How long could wood and metal hold? Her gaze swept the room, desperate for an equalizer. It landed on the bedside lamp, solid oak, reassuringly heavy. Disconnecting it, she gripped its base, the knife held tight in her other hand. Thus armed, a desperate sentinel, she waited, every sinew taut, listening for the telltale sounds of breach. Minutes bled into an eternity. Sporadic sounds punctuated the suffocating silence. The crunch of boots on gravel circling the perimeter. The distinct groan of weight on the porch steps. Each noise sent fresh jolts of adrenaline through her system. As the hours dragged, profound weariness began its insidious creep. Her arms throbbed from the tension of holding her makeshift arsenal, yet lowering them felt unthinkable. The initial surge of panicked energy waned, leaving behind a residue of tremors and nausea. Just as the taut wire of her endurance felt ready to snap, a new sound shattered the stillness. The unmistakable, jagged percussion of breaking glass. He was inside. Her grip tightened on the lamp and knife. Her body pressed flat against the wall beside the bedroom door. She heard him moving through the main room, his footfalls measured, deliberate. Little bird, where do you hide?" he crooned, the playful tone curdling her blood. "I promise." This won't hurt excessively. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and furious. She blinked them back fiercely. Weakness was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not now. Be ready. The floorboards just outside the bedroom creaked under his weight. I know you're in there, he murmured, his voice unnervingly close. No need to prolong this. The doorknob jiggled violently. Ilara held her breath, muscles coiled like springs. Then, with a sickening splintering roar, the door exploded inward. Silas stood framed in the ruined doorway, a crowbar dangling from his hand. Time seemed to dilate. She saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes as he registered her position, flush against the wall. She saw the crowbar begin its upward arc. She denied him the completion of that swing. A raw cry, part terror, part fury, ripped from her lungs as she launched herself forward, swinging the heavy lamp base with every ounce of strength she possessed. It connected with his skull with a wet, sickening thwack. He staggered, momentarily stunned but not felled. Without pause, Ilara drove her shoulder hard into his torso. They crashed to the floor in a chaotic tangle of limbs, the knife and crowbar clattering away across the wooden planks. A frantic scramble ensued, a desperate grapple for dominance. He possessed brute strength, but she fought with the ferocity of cornered prey. Somehow, leveraging panic and momentum, she found herself astride him. Snatching up the lamp again, she brought it down hard on his head. Once, twice, a third time. His struggle ceased. He lay limp beneath her. Scrambling clear, Ilara sucked in ragged, burning breaths. Silas lay still, a dark stain blooming on the floorboards around his head. A terrifying thought pulsed. Had she killed him? Then, the faint but steady rise and fall of his chest registered, unconscious. Relief, potent and debilitating, buckled her knees. Staggering upright, she scanned the room wildly. Restrained before he woke, she unearthed a coil of rope from a storage closet, her trembling fingers managing clumsy knots around his wrists and ankles. Then, drawing on reserves she hadn't known existed, she hauled his dead weight out onto the porch, securing him tightly to one of the sturdy support posts. Only then did the dam break. She collapsed onto the porch steps. Great, shuddering sobs tearing through her as the enormity of the night crashed down. As the first tentative strokes of dawn painted the eastern sky in fragile hues of rose and gold, the distant growl of an engine reached her ears. A pickup truck emerged from the winding track, Mr. Henderson, the property manager, arriving for his routine weekly inspection. Ilara waved, a frantic, desperate gesture. The truck slowed, pulled alongside the cabin. Mr. Henderson's cheerful morning greeting died on his lips, his expression shifting rapidly from pleasantry to stunned horror as he took in the scene. Ilara, tear-streaked and disheveled, beside the bound, unconscious figure lashed to the porch post. The ensuing hours dissolved into a disorienting montage. The wail of sirens, flashing lights painting the trees in strobes of red and blue. Uniformed officers, paramedics, the careful cadence of questions, statements taken, the stark flash of cameras documenting the violated space. While a paramedic gently checked her for injuries, Detective Miller approached, his face etched with professional gravity. "You're exceptionally fortunate, miss," he stated, his voice low. This individual, Silas Croft, we've had an active search out for him for several months, linked to a string of similar assaults in isolated properties like this one. Elara nodded, numb, adrift in a sea of exhaustion and dull relief. You did well, the detective added, his tone softening slightly. You fought back, you survived. That's the essential thing. Later, as they escorted Silas, now conscious and cuffed, towards a waiting cruiser, their eyes met across the clearing. The feral wildness she'd seen earlier was banked, replaced by a sullen, defeated fury. Elara held his gaze unflinchingly, refusing to yield ground even now. She had confronted the embodiment of her deepest fears and had not broken. The sun climbed higher, bathing the clearing in deceptive warmth as Elara prepared to depart. Tossing her overnight bag into the back of the cruiser, assigned to transport her back towards civilization, she cast a final look at the tranquil setting. The rustic cabin, once a symbol of escape, now irrevocably tainted. The peace was fractured, the illusion of impregnable safety shattered. Yet, as she settled into the passenger seat, a core of unexpected steel solidified within her. She had unearthed a resilience, a strength previously unimagined. The wilderness had harbored profound danger, but it hadn't consumed her. Whatever awaited her return, whatever future trials might arise, she knew now she possessed the capacity to face them. She had stared directly into the abyss and emerged, scarred perhaps, but undeniably whole. As the cabin receded from view behind the winding trees, Elara closed her eyes, releasing a long, slow breath. The nightmare had passed. It was time to go home. The low thrum of ventilation systems breathed through the shadowed arteries of the corridor, a mechanical pulse in the otherwise profound stillness. 2 hours past midnight. Omnigen Corp, a fortress of gleaming chrome and hushed secrets, slept or pretended to. I, Elias, was merely the night custodian, a ghost pushing a cart through its slumbering halls, a job I'd clung to these past months. Yet tonight, the quiet felt different, taut, like a wire stretched to breaking. An ambient dread thickened the recycled air, the building itself seeming to clench against an unseen pressure. My simple, tedious existence was poised, unknowingly, on the precipice of a plunge into corporate shadow plays and secrets that bled. This chronicle belongs to me, Elias, a testament to how I stumbled into a web spun by ambition and avarice, a web that nearly consumed me whole. The nocturnal shift at Omnigen, with its inflated wages sealed by ironclad non-disclosure agreements, was my lifeline. The means to fund my sister Maya's escalating medical costs. Omnigen pioneered the bleeding edge of genetic science, hoarding its breakthroughs like a dragon god's gold. The night unfolded in familiar rhythms, antiseptic wipe-downs of sterile surfaces, the rustle of emptying waste bins, the rhythmic slosh of the mop across polished floors. Routine was my shield, but approaching the primary research wing on the 3rd level, the shield fractured. Sector Gamma's main laboratory door, usually sealed tighter than a pharaoh's tomb, stood fractionally ajar, leaking a sliver of cold, artificial light into the dim passage. A frown tightened my brow. Protocol demanded darkness and vacancy at this hour. Perhaps a researcher, lost in thought, had neglected a monitor. I nudged the heavy door inward. The tableau within sent ice flooding my veins. Two silhouettes swathed in dark, tactical gear, hunched over a console, fingers flying across the keyboard, siphoning data onto a sleek palm-sized drive. No familiar lab codes, no faces I recognized. Only the blank anonymity of ski masks confirming their illicit purpose. A floor tile must have shifted under my weight. An infinitesimal sound amplified in the charged silence. Heads snapped up, eyes locked. A frozen tableau of mutual shock held us for a heartbeat, then shattered into pandemonium. One figure charged, a predator sensing prey, while the other desperately hammered keystrokes, racing to complete the digital theft. I recoiled, instinct screaming louder than thought. Security, the nearest panic button, pulsed like a distant red star at the corridor's end. I pivoted and sprinted, my own heart hammering a frantic counterpoint to the echoing thud of pursuing footsteps, closing the distance with terrifying speed. My fingers stretched, brushing the cool plastic of the alarm panel. Then a vice-like grip clamped onto my collar, wrenching me violently backward. I slammed onto the linoleum, breath exploding from my lungs in a painful gasp. Air wheezed back into me as a face materialized above, obscured by the mask, eyes chips of obsidian. "You weren't supposed to see," a voice grated, low and rough. "Creates complications." Raw terror, primal and paralyzing, surged through me. Not petty thieves, spies. And I was a witness, a loose thread in their meticulously woven scheme. A desperate surge of adrenaline fueled a wild kick. It connected, jarringly, with a knee. The figure staggered, a grunt escaping clenched teeth, granting me a precious sliver of time. I scrambled up, adrenaline overriding pain, and slammed my palm onto the alarm. A piercing electronic shriek ripped through the silence, bathing the corridor in strobing crimson light. Curses spat from behind the masks. The rapid tattoo of retreating footsteps faded down the hall. But the immediate threat wasn't gone. Sanctuary. I needed sanctuary now. I dove into the nearest supply closet, burrowing behind towering shelves laden with chemical cleaners and disinfectant sprays, the acrid scents filling my nostrils. My heart thrashed against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I was certain they could hear even over a deafening alarm. Seconds elongated into agonizing minutes. Waiting, listening, then finally, shouts, the pounding rhythm of multiple running feet. Security. A shuddering sigh escaped me. The immediate danger had passed. Or so I believed, foolishly. Emerging cautiously from the chemical-scented darkness, a hand, swift and practiced, clamped over my mouth, another arm locking around my chest, dragging me backward into an adjacent, unlit office. I was spun around, finding myself inches from one of the intruders, the mask still concealing his features. "Listen," he hissed, the word sharp as broken glass. "You tell them you saw someone fleeing. Didn't get a clear look, got it?" Fear was a physical force choking me. I managed a jerky nod. "Good," the voice rasped, menace tightening around the single syllable. Because deviation means consequences. We know your address. We know about Maya. Don't tempt us. A hard shove sent me stumbling back into the corridor just as uniformed guards rounded the corner, weapons drawn. My voice trembled, a traitorous quiver as I relayed the fabricated account. They seemed to accept it. Relief, momentarily overriding suspicion. They thanked me for triggering the alarm, requested a formal statement later. Watching them sweep the area, a toxic cocktail of guilt and fear churned in my gut. What monstrous thing had I just enabled? The remainder of my shift was a disconnected fugue state. I moved through the motions, cleaning, tidying, but my mind replayed the encounter, the threat, the lie. What were they stealing? How did they possess knowledge of my sister? What abyss awaited if the truth surfaced? Exhaustion warred with hypervigilance as I finally reached my apartment building. Taped to my door, stark against the peeling paint, was a single folded paper. Unfolding it revealed two chilling words. Remember, silence. The ensuing days blurred into a paranoid haze. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker in my peripheral vision sent jolts of anxiety through me. Shadows seemed to lengthen and cling. When Omnigen Security formally took my statement, I recited the lie, each word a self-inflicted wound. But as their internal investigation ostensibly proceeded, anomalies surfaced like oil on water. Access logs showed impossible entries. Surveillance footage from key cameras mysteriously vanished. An internal hand, it was terrifyingly clear, was meticulously scrubbing the night's events clean. The gnawing certainty that I was drowning in depths far beyond my understanding spurred me to action. I began to truly listen, tuning my ears to the hushed, urgent conversations drifting from labs and offices during my rounds. Snippets about project pressures, funding anxieties. Then one evening, hidden near a ventilation grate, I intercepted fragments of a heated whispered argument between two senior researchers. The words ethical boundaries and Project Chimera snagged my attention. We're trespassing in God's domain. One voice trembled with conviction. If this leaks, the fallout will dwarf the cloning controversies. The complex scientific terminology sailed over my head, but the terrifying core resonated. Omnigen was nurturing something monumental, something teetering on the knife edge of ethics, potent enough to warrant theft, threats, perhaps even murder. Armed with this fragmented, frightening knowledge, I stood at a crossroads. Maintain the silence, hug the shadows, pray the storm past, or pursue the truth, drag in myself, and potentially Maya, into the line of fire. The choice was ultimately wrested from my hands. Arriving for my shift the following night, I found the third floor descended into controlled chaos. Smoke stained the walls near the main lab. The acrid tang of burnt materials hung heavy in the air. A fire, strategic, destructive. While assisting the cleanup crew, I overheard the CEO's low, flinty voice conferring with the head of security. This wasn't accidental, he stated, his tone devoid of warmth. Someone's actively sabotaging the research. Identify them. Use any means necessary. The realization struck with chilling clarity. This transcended mere corporate theft. Lives, possibly my own, were chips in a high-stakes game. Over the subsequent week, necessity transformed me into an unlikely PI. My janitorial past became a skeleton key, granting me access to empty offices, discarded notes, fragmented data trails. I pieced together the nature of Project Chimera, a revolutionary gene therapy protocol with the potential to eradicate hereditary diseases, but also possessing the terrifying capacity for non-therapeutic human augmentation, creating abilities far beyond natural conception. The deeper I delved, the more palpable the danger became. The unnerving sensation of being watched intensified, clinging to me like the sterile scent of the labs. Twice, a nondescript sedan mirrored my route home, disappearing only when I took evasive turns. Just as the crushing weight of my isolation threatened to paralyze me, an unexpected lifeline appeared. Dr. Aris Thorne, a lead geneticist whose office I routinely cleaned, intercepted me one night, her expression etched with worry. "You witnessed something during the break-in," she stated quietly, her gaze direct. "And I've seen you searching. Elias, you're swimming in treacherous waters." She confessed her own escalating unease regarding Chimera's ethical trajectory. Her suspicion that factions within Omnigen plan to auction the research off to unscrupulous powers, consequences be damned. "I can facilitate exposing this," she offered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But discretion is paramount. We are both under scrutiny." A fragile alliance formed in the sterile quiet. Combining Thorne's high-level access with my spectral mobility, we began accumulating digital proof of the conspiracy. Encrypted communications, falsified reports, illicit financial transfers. It was perilous. Close calls left our nerves frayed. Yet finally, we held it. A compressed drive containing enough evidence to dismantle the operation. The night designated for our escape with the data, the facility erupted. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights painted the corridors in frantic strobing patterns. Security personnel materialized alongside figures in severe dark suits, flooding the hallways. In the ensuing bedlam, Thorne and I were separated. I spotted a rarely used service exit and bolted, the crucial flash drive clutched sweatily in my fist. As I sprinted across the rain-slicked parking lot towards my battered car, the sharp crack of gunfire echoed behind me. A cold dread seized my heart. Thorne. Had she made it? The subsequent days were a maelstrom of police debriefings and ravenous media coverage. The story detonated. Omnigen Corp. The miracle cure with monstrous potential. The conspiracy snaking through its executive suites. Ultimately, indictments fell upon several high-ranking officials. Omnigen's stock value cratered. Project Chimera's future became suspended in ethical and legal limbo. Dr. Thorne, thankfully, survived her injuries, lauded publicly as a courageous whistleblower. For my part, a substantial settlement was offered, contingent on my discretion, regarding certain internal operational details. The sum was enough to erase Maya's medical debts and seed a modest landscaping business, far removed from sterile corridors and whispered secrets. Yet, even now, years distant, sleep is sometimes fractured by echoes of the terror that stalked Omnigen's halls. I carry the knowledge that the most unassuming paths can lead into extraordinary peril, and that the single, difficult choice to act, regardless of the personal cost, possesses the power to irrevocably alter the course of everything.